Hi, I'm Tunde Ogunwole, and welcome to the Real Men of Real Estate on Edge of America Network TV. I am excited to introduce our first episode of Real Men of Real Estate. I'm joined by some wonderful guests who are really going to get into those exciting issues in real estate. To my right is Bryan Fox. He's an all-star real estate professional who's going to talk about the market from his perspective and some of the issues we get into. Stephen Matley, the president of Coast to Coast Equities. And also Jonathan Preston, one of the fabulous real estate attorneys who's got over 20 years of experience in real estate and construction. Today we're going to focus on the legal issues in real estate, specifically partnerships. All of us want to make some money. How do we form these partnerships to acquire property and make things happen? Jonathan, can you give us a couple tips?
Sure. What usually happens is 1, 2, 3 people come into my office informing me that they wish to acquire a property. The first question is well, how are we going to hold the title to the property? Someone suggested tenants in common. Someone also may have suggested holding it into an LLC. Each of these has its own legal issues. Tenants in common is a very simple form of joint ownership in a property. The problem is that it makes it very unclear as to who actually owns what percentage of the property, although that can be specified in the deed. It also has problems when you have difficulty when someone's not living up to their end of the bargain, because most people who hold property and tenants in common is some form of verbal agreement, never bothered to put that in writing. And they usually have not visited an attorney's office beforehand because most attorneys would say, don't do it. A couple other things with tenants in common is that if one person decides not to live up to their bargain, they're still on title, they still have a right to possession of the property. It's very difficult to evict that person when they refuse to pay their portion of the mortgage. Also that comes up is when someone does not hold title and they don't want to, is someone on title but they don't want to pay rent, often the other two parties may want to get them off the title, and if they refuse to convey, what do you do? Well, that ends up in what's called a partition case, which is a legal action to force the sale of the property. The better solution, which virtually every lawyer will recommend, is to form a real estate partnership agreement and then to put the property into an LLC. And this is in conjunction with an operating agreement and an LLC. The reason this is so important is because you can specify each of these issues before the property is actually acquired. Who is going to pay what, how much percentage of the mortgage payment is going to be borne by each member of the partnership. Of course, all of the other issues such as possession, eviction, all of that can be discussed before the property is acquired. And
so thank you. You've given us a really good overview of the differences between tenants in common and structuring something within an LLC. Steve, you've seen a number of these transactions over the years. What are some of your perspectives on partnership structure?
Yeah, LLCs are the primary vehicle that my company uses because we do bring investors in who are our partners, they're silent partners, and sometimes we even have multiple managing partners in a project. So the LLCs are our go-to way of acquiring property. And there are a few downsides to it with the upsides, but I think the upsides much outweigh the downside. So one of the downsides is, let's say a partner comes in and they want to do a 1031 exchange. Well, that's not a straight exchange because you're exchanging property for basically shares of a company. You're not actually investing in the real estate, you're investing in shares of the company that will own the real estate. The LLC is a company. And so you've got a few issues like that. You have to walk those lines a little bit, which can be worked out. There's ways to figure all that out. But overall, as far as the sharing of the property and splitting profits out the back end, the LLCs are very flexible. It's not like a corporation where you own specific shares. The LLC is a lot more flexible. You can just designate within the operating agreement who has what percentages of what, who's responsible for what, and it makes things a lot easier. And we found them very, very effective.
Fantastic. And Bryan, you've seen a number of people who've acquired property, either their family members or business partners who are involved in these deals. What are some of your perspectives on?
Don't do business with family. No, I'm just kidding. You can do business with family, but keep it incredibly simple. For me, I work with people at very basic levels. This is maybe their second transaction. So keeping their LLCs very uncomplicated, 50-50 split or 75-25 or based on labor, whatever they're going to do, make it very easy and they can write it on a napkin. The LLC can take it from there. But if they don't do basic terms, it's as if they have no clue what's going to happen next, and that's when they start fighting over, squabbling over money and work and labor. So I think partnerships are great. Honestly, I've done so many partnerships myself, but if you try to make it this big thing, then for the average person, it becomes so complicated. They don't know the actual work they're going to go do. They're worried about the percentages they're going to make on money that hasn't happened yet.
So keep it simple, make it
I
very
agree.
clear so everybody understands what the splits are and what happens within the structure. And all three of you are big advocates of LLCs in general.
I have a question for Jonathan on that, and that is, we use them because they're short term. We're in and we're out, and LLCs are for temporary companies, really short term. What about people that are looking at holding this property in the family for the next 40, 50 years?
Well, for 40, 50 years, you might want to talk about forming a trust. It might be a better solution if that's family, real estate holding trust. Or you could form an actual corporation, an S corp, which has a slightly different flexibility on selling of shares. LLCs usually reference membership units, is what it's referred to. It's simply a more simple way of acquiring a percentage in a business without having corporate meetings. But they both get the same tax treatment as far as S corp election.
And you've touched on a number of different ways. You've talked about LLCs, S corps, tenants in common. Are there any other structures that are out there for those who are uninitiated on ways that they could form partnerships?
Well, there are other structures. But what usually happens is someone comes in and a property is acquired in a method that it was not supposed to have been acquired in. For instance, as joint tenancy. And all of a sudden maybe there was a divorce that happens, and then usually the family court would resolve that issue. You might have a property that's in one person's name, but it was never conveyed into the LLC that was promised to be formed. That's a common issue. As far as other vehicles to own property, I haven't seen anything other than basic tenants in common, LLCs, trusts, a form of a corporation. You could form an actual just a general partnership. Would not be advisable. It's basically would not give you any liability protection that a LLC could.
And in the past we've used those, but we've only used them for that 90 to 120 day feasibility period, and then it converts over to an LLC after that.
Fantastic. Well, we covered a number of different ways that you could hold property in these partnership relationships, whether they're business partnerships or family partnerships. We're going to take a brief break to let our sponsors share a little bit more about the activity that's happening on the network. Stay tuned as we come back through the rest of the episode to talk more about the legal issues that you can experience in real estate.
Hey guys, how are you today?
Good.
I'm here to talk about how with technology you can make amazing worlds. Come with me. My team and I bring the Halo world to life.
Is that you?
That is me. I wasn't a math genius and I knew nothing about coding. But you guys do. You guys have the power to change things.
I want your job.
I want you to have my job.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
Welcome back to the Real Men of Real Estate. I'm Tunde Ogunwole, your host. We had an exciting discussion about different ways that we could hold and acquire property in partnership. We're going to continue the discussion in legal issues in construction and contracting to round out some of our knowledge on legal issues. As it relates to construction law, Jonathan, what are some of the tips and tricks that people should be aware about?
Well, as a homeowner, California has a very aggressive contracting scheme to make sure that contractors are properly licensed, bonded, and that they basically follow the scope of their license to make sure that a homeowner hires someone who's qualified to provide the work. California law requires contractors essentially to have a proper license. There's basically what you refer to as an A is an engineering license, a B is a general building, and a C classification is a specialty license. So whatever type of trade you're hiring, the first question is you want to check the license to make sure it's appropriate for the trade. If you could get over that step, then you want to make sure that the contractor is properly insured Liability insurance is a plus. The bond has to be current, and all of this information is on the the Contractor State Licensing Board website. Right. Also, workers' compensation insurance is also available for the public's use on the website. Assuming the contractor fits that, then you basically want to make sure that they have the expertise to do the particular job that you're hiring.
Fantastic. You've walked through different ways to understand their licensure and where you can find some of that information to vet that the contractor has the experience to do the work that you want them to do. Steve, any thoughts that you'd like to add to this?
Well, my background is construction management. And the idea that there actually are bachelor's and master's degrees in this subject matter tells you it's a lot more than most homeowners are aware of, what they can get themselves into. That's why you really need to talk to some experts and get the right people on board. There's a temptation among homeowners to go cheap and hire the handyman person, hire some people out of the back of Home Depot or whatever that have some skills and some good labor. The problem is, as he mentioned, insurance. If they get injured on your property, it's yours. Whereas the contractor is going to cover all that. Fantastic. That's something most people don't consider. Also, I made a living when I was a contractor. I was a general contractor at one time. And one of the ways I made a living during one of our recessions, because they do come around every once in a while, was fixing all the bad construction that had been done in remodels because they didn't meet code. And I've seen electrical and structural stuff that just would scare the heck out of you. And our job is to tear it all out and fix it or just get rid of it because it had all been done wrong. And that told me a homeowner took a shortcut, tried to save a little money, maybe did it themselves, probably hired some day laborers or something, or got a handyman that knows just enough to be dangerous. And one thing I learned out of that is there's a lot of people that ought to have their tools confiscated and their rights to Home Depot revoked. But that's the world we're in. So do it right. Get the right people, vet your contractors, make sure they have insurance, and get the right people in there. This is your house.
Fantastic. And Bryan, you've seen a number of new construction and people doing remodels in your business. What are some of your perspectives on ways to contract and contract wisely?
Honestly, it's kind of a very common sense industry. Like you mentioned, if you're pulling somebody out of the back of a parking lot, probably not the person you want building your foundation of your property, at least not up front, without you knowing how it should look in the beginning. For me, I've seen a lot of problems when you don't know what the system should look like. So one of the worst words in the construction business is a thing called a change order. And that's where you've got this giant list of stuff that say, hey, this is the work list. We're going to bid $40,000 for this job. And as soon as they start delivering material and getting into the job, they've now started the work. They're technically contracted. They're due their payment once they start delivering material. And most people don't know that once they put stuff on your property, they're a part of that property now. It's a part of the contract. They're in. And so if there's a change order, if these things come up, you could end up spending 20, can go to 80 because, we didn't know that and you didn't tell us. It's so ambiguous what can happen. And once they get this new list of stuff, your contract pricing go way up. So the flip side to losing money isn't the bad work, it's doubling the cost because they didn't tell you everything up front. It's how they get the job. And so that can be an effect on a construction loan. So when you get a construction loan, you're getting a set amount of money and you have to submit all of the contractor's work to the bank and they have to sign off on this work as you go, giving you money a little bit at a time. Well, if you increase the cost, you might be stuck in the middle of construction because you didn't function for that money from the bank and now you have to go find it from somewhere else. And so that could be cash, it could be all kinds of things. You could sell 401k stock to finish your house, not realizing this could be avoided had you got a good bid. And usually they say, get 3 bids, take the middle one. That's usually the best rule of thumb I can give you.
Well, that's fantastic. It's very near and dear to my heart. I work as a development manager overseeing general contractors for commercial real estate, and change order rates and controlling that is something really important in the budget. So you bring up a number of key points, getting a good contractor who's licensed for their area of expertise so they're not having to redo work, as well as making sure that you understand the scope of what the price is and vetting that before you go forward with a specific contractor.
There's a lot of work happens before the construction. That's a problem. People get an idea in their head and they run off and they just want to get the construction going. The contract spells out what you're going to do. And so the things that Bryan brought up are things that all have to be thought out ahead of time to avoid a lot of those changes. And so there's the 3 Ps, the price, what are we going to pay for this and what's that based on? So when you're doing reconstruction, you may not know. You open a wall up, who knows what's inside there? So reconstruction and remodeling can be a little tricky sometimes, but there ought to be preset charges for certain things they might run into that's in the contract and labor rates and those type of things, markups on change orders. then the period, how long are they going to be? How long is it going to take? What's the time frame? A schedule that is in there you can hold them to so they don't open your house up and then disappear and then it rains on you. And then there is the performance, which is the scope of work. And that is very carefully laying out, this is exactly what we're going to be doing. This is what we're removing, this is what we're replacing, this is what has to be upgraded, this has to be changed, these are the permits we need. All that has to be spelled out ahead of time, and there's actually a lot of work you have to do before you bring that contractor in to do the very first spec of work or deliver the first item on the
Fantastic. You
site.
talked about the price, you talked about the performance, and you also talked about the period of time. That's fantastic. You had a couple other comments
Yes,
after that.
what Steve was commenting on, it's very important to have your plans completed before you actually have a contractor bid on them. I've seen this happen many, many times where the plans are a work in progress, and yet we're getting bids to build a single-family residence, which is, not even designed yet. And so you might, it's a little crazy that people do this, but that's the most important thing I would suggest to a homeowner who's trying to basically get the completeness of their plans, get them approved, get your comments back from the city before you start taking bids on them. As well as for a home improvement contract. What you mentioned in regards to time, duration, costs, change order issues, all of that must be specified in an HIC contract for improvements to real property. This is
An
for
HIC, what's an HIC
it
contract?
stands for a home improvement contract. California has a set of laws that basically regulate contracts for improvements, which require things like everyone knows that you cannot pay any more than $1,000 to a contractor or 10%, whichever is less. That's as a down payment. The contract has to specify a duration, start and stop date.
Which is why if a contractor shows up and they want 50% down before they move in, get them out of there. Don't work with them.
That's a
so
good
you have
don't
to do your
know.
homework.
Yeah,
know
do
these
your
things.
homework on this guy. And
Or just watch the
this
show
individual.
and get the.
Well, this is part of the homework.
This is part of the
a
homework.
signed
Get the homework
viewing for your homework right here.
Fantastic, fantastic. Jonathan, you touched on something really powerful. You said that get the plans done. Make sure that the scope of work is clear so that a licensed contractor, a smart contractor can give you a full price. If you're a homeowner and don't fully understand how to read plans, what's one way that you can go about it for anybody on the table? A good way to know that.
Same way you hire the attorney to review your contract, you need to hire someone that is a designer, an architect, depending what you're doing. If you're doing work outside, maybe a civil engineer, landscape architect, depending what you're doing and what you're trying to get done. Hire the right expert that has the certificates, the licenses. An architect or an engineer is going to have a stamp and a number that's registered with the state. Absolutely. So make sure you have that, because that means they now have the liability for that design.
Not that this matters, but you can always have this open period of discovery in a transaction. So the escrow period is there for you to do your homework. If you had built into the contract that, look, hey, we're buying this house, but we want a 30-day discovery period where we're going to do X, Y, and Z, you have the ability to open up some stuff, get some things figured out to figure out what the cost is. And until then, you can go by a basic price per square foot. Say, okay, these three guys, they tell us $250 to $450 a square foot. Okay, well, that's a lot based on finishes, how much marble versus how much quartz you're going to do, and that'll give you an idea. Use that as a gauge. So if you went into a property and it's 10,000 square feet and it's $250 a square foot, okay, where it's going to cost us this to this, and then open up an escrow period that gives you the time to actually investigate, then you can figure it out. Especially as the market starts to shift a little bit, you're going to have a little bit more opportunity and time where people are going to let you ask some questions, maybe give you some more of the information that they weren't willing to give you in a seller's market, and then you can make a more educated decision.
Establish an initial budget, price per square foot, and then use the due diligence time to whittle down and really drive into the detail.
Don't be desperate. Think that lowest bid is the only way to go. That's what we're trained, that everything's lowest bid. But
hold that thought. We've got a couple more. We've got a couple more tidbits we'd like to share as it relates to legal issues. Again, I'm Tunde Ogunwole. You're on Real Estate, Real Men of Real Estate, and we'll come back and close our thoughts on construction law.
Put the keys down, Kevin.
But I'm gonna drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
My text to emoji ratio has gotten a little out of hand.
A little?
Yep, I'm definitely gonna call a ride home.
First time I tried Vicodin, and it was laying around my mom's house. I didn't know they'd be this addictive. I didn't know how far I'd go to get more.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
Welcome back. I'm Tunde Ogunwole at the Real Men of Real Estate on EAN TV. We've had a wonderful discussion about legal issues in real estate. We started off talking about partnership, transitioned to talking about construction law, and last but not least, we wanted to find out, how do you find a good attorney? Jonathan?
Well, there's lots of ways. I think the most common ways people ask if they ask their friend if they know an attorney, and then they end up having a conversation with that person to ask if, whatever the legal issue is, if that's in their expertise. The first thing you probably want to do is actually verify, go on the person's website and see what they're actually representing themselves out to be before talking to them. And so in case you're asking for a construction attorney and the person's never handled a construction case, whether it be a mechanics lien, homeowners problem with a property or what have you, then they're probably not truly a construction lawyer. They may have some basic construction law. A couple other things, you want to make sure that the attorney understands what your expectations are. And so if the client wants to take this all to trial, if they're looking for justice, or if they just want the matter resolved, the attorney is the agent of the client, so that he has to follow the client's wishes. And if the client just wants the matter resolved as quickly and as efficiently as possible, then the attorney needs to follow that. Lastly, I would suggest make sure that the fee agreements, billing are reasonable. This is a common complaint from clients to attorneys, is that of overcharging. Make sure the rates are within the community for where the attorney is, and that the attorney's billing practices don't follow a sort of nickel and dime attitude. Anytime I can bill the client, I'm going to do that sort of approach. Mm-hmm. Those are the common complaints. If you can find an attorney who's reasonable, then you found the right guy.
Fantastic. Steve, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, every attorney I've ever used has been personally referred by somebody. I've never gone into the internet and just looked for attorneys. It's always been, I've talked to people and it's been a personal referral. That's actually how I met Jonathan, was through a personal referral. Also, make sure that you have the right attorney for the right thing. Just because you have a great attorney that helped you maybe set up your trust doesn't mean that's the right attorney to help you with your real estate transaction if that's not their expertise. Criminal defense attorneys aren't real estate attorneys. So you have to make sure you got the right expert for the right thing. And again, how many times have I said it? Do your due diligence, do your homework, do the research. It takes a little bit of effort, but make sure you've talked to people, vetted, and you know that this is a good attorney who does what they're supposed to do and does it well.
Honestly, this is going to sound very stupid. I would say Yelp a little bit. Like, not Yelp specifically, but the only way to figure out what customers think of that person is a place where you can see customer-centric views. And I hate to say this, but Angie's List, Yelp, things where people are out there very vocal. It takes one bad experience to say what I don't like and 10 good experiences to say what you do like. So you'll have a lot more of the what we don't like about somebody in the attorney field. They take the brunt of that kind of focus. But I would look at places where you can actually see what people are saying about it, and you'll get a good sense of what the worst to come would be with them. And maybe you don't know the upside, but if you can handle the downside, that's at least a good start.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank every one of our guests today. We had a wonderful day talking through these legal issues in real estate. Stay tuned to Real Men of Real Estate. We have a number of episodes in front of us. I'm Tunde Ogunwole. We're looking forward to seeing you. If you're looking for places to find us, you can find us on EAN TV, on Roku, and Amazon Fire. Look forward to seeing you.